everyone. I'm Tina Reynolds, and I'm here with Larry Lee with the Sacramento Observer. What we're doing here is Black stories that white people need to hear. And I think that it's really important. The way that I equate all of this is when, as a gay person, when I came out to more and more people and lived my life out, more people embraced who I was for who I am and got rid of the stigma of all the homophobia. And I think that part of these Black stories that white people need to hear is we need to hear them and know that Larry's life is different than mine. And I want to hear the stories of what's happening. So Larry, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Tina, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for creating this platform for conversation and discussion. It speaks volumes to your leadership. And so I thank you. The community is better for having you here.
You and the community is better for having you. You are such a leader in your community, and your father before you. And I'm sure his father before him, because it's something that's passed down, right?
Very true.
So the whole idea is I want to know about the weightiness of today and your life, how it is that it has affected you, and then tell me about how heavy it is when you go out, and what is it that you always bring with you?
Sure. Well, I want to preface this by saying first, the African American experience is something that obviously I've been living with my entire life, and I look at it, I think, differently than some folks would. I am an eternal optimist. I've been fortunate. I have grown up through the lens of the Sacramento Observer newspaper, observing and chronicling the African American experience in its fullness and in its entirety my entire life. We're 57 years old as a publication, and I'm 47. And so being able to observe my entire life, not just the challenges and the heartaches of our community, but also to see the greatness of our community. So I've been able to observe, the professionals, the Black professionals, the Black educators, the doctors, the community-based organization leaders, the coaches, and all of those people who have the entrepreneurs, all those people who have helped create an African American community here in Sacramento. And so while I understand and recognize the question that you're asking, I want to preface it by saying, I don't like to dwell in negativity. I don't think it does good for us. There's health studies that show that, when you internalize trauma and things like that, how it takes years off of your life. And I'm trying to be here for a minute. So I like to look at things on the sunny side. I know that's your mantra for Uptown Studios for sure. And so we embrace that as well too. So with that said, however, I think that to answer your question, the experience that we have is something that is weighty. You equate, our experience similar to yours. The difference is for us, when we walk into the room, folks know that we're Black. When someone of your community walks into the room, they don't necessarily know if they're straight or gay. And I think that when that immediate recognition of this person is different from me, always puts a different sort of dynamic in the room. And so, living with this every day is, again, like I said, something that I think is beautiful and something that I embrace. But it is a challenge when you're dealing with systemic racist institutions that really have created a dynamic that creates disparities, and really trauma and death in our communities in ways that it doesn't affect other communities, and that is hard. I'll be honest. Where this is Tuesday, a couple days after the shootings in Atlanta and the uprising there as well too. And I'll be honest, my heart was heavy all weekend. We've been spending months dealing with the coronavirus, and then going into what is this season of um, uh, recognition of these disparities to people outside of our community, which I am so thankful for. The protests, the marching, the uprising, the I call it the moral awakening of a lot of communities outside of the African American community. They're recognizing that, hey, this is not working. These are our brothers and sisters who are dying for really no reason. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, those deaths are completely, they are completely preventable.
Yes.
And so seeing, so much uncomfortableness for people like yourselves and those outside of the African American community gives me a level of hope where I see that, maybe there is, like I said, this moral awakening where people are recognizing that this is something different. We've got to change this. There's systems in place that are institutional and have been here for literally centuries, and we have to change those. And so, while I shed way too many tears over the weekend, I'm rejuvenated by hearing people like yourself being involved and trying to make sure that they can help however they can.
Well, and if we don't step up, if you leave it for someone else, it may never happen. Sure. So stepping up is easy for me. My life has been that way. It's like, oh, something needs to be done. I'll be out there carrying the sign.
Sure.
So with the stories that you've heard about systemic racism, let's just talk about the police department here in Sacramento. And it really is any police department in today's world. Have you ever had meetings with them?
Yeah.
And how? I mean, you've talked through this. We've been through this before.
Yeah. This
is not a new game.
No.
How is the conversation going to be different this time?
That's a very good question. So yes, of course, we've had conversations for years with most of our law enforcement agencies in the region. In Sacramento, I think there's 13 different law enforcement agencies in the greater Sacramento area. The Sacramento Police Department is just one of them. Mm-hmm. We have an amazing police chief in Daniel Hahn, who I think is forward-thinking, is thoughtful, responsible, and he wants to be held accountable in his leadership. And I think that is tremendous for SACPD. The challenge with that is that we have, all these other law enforcement agencies that don't have such leadership, that may be struggling with, culture and systems and biases that they're not necessarily addressing. And I think that, you hear a lot of conversation. Oh, well, there's a lot of most officers are good. We've got just a couple bad ones. And I'm reminded of the Chris Rock joke where he said, some industries you just can't have bad apples. You can't have bad pilots, right?
Right.
Every pilot has to be great.
Yeah.
Every police officer has to be great. Every person who wears a badge, who's sworn to be a public servant, a peace officer, needs to be great, and that's the calling. It's similar to my uncle was the city's first black fire chief. It's similar to firefighters. They have a calling. They run into a burning building. Yes. They know they are feared for their lives, but they go in with a level of courage and dignity that is in the effort to preserve life. And I think our law enforcement officers, or the law enforcement, has lost its way in that, in this over militarized effort. Now, to your point, how is this moment going to be different? I'm hoping that we have some courageous leaders in the region. Yesterday, the mayor released a hopeful the beginning first steps. I'm going to preface that the beginning first steps of what could look like some sort of police reform.
Yeah.
And I think, we talk a lot about reform. We talk about, hiring and that sort of things. I want to equate it to like education reform. Public schools do a pretty good job, However, if you look at it in its totality, you recognize the disparities that are happening in public education. You realize it's not really working as good as it should for all of us, or for the least of us.
Yes.
And I think that there's obviously has been a movement over the last 20 years to have education reform, where there are charter schools and other things that are helping to make public education more accessible and more accountable for the communities in which they serve. And I think that that's where we need to go with policing. But it has to be in this region. It's got to be a regional effort. Our community is over policed. If you think about communities like a community like Oak Park, for instance, you could be detained by as many as 4 or 5 different law enforcement agencies. You can be pulled over by SAC PD. You can be detained by the Sheriff's Department, UC Davis Police, UOP Police, CHP can get involved. I mean, there's a lot of different agencies that can get involved with, just a neighborhood. And just as very simply as crossing from one street to the other, one side is city, the other side is county.
Yeah.
And so it can be, and if the tactics and the training that happens at SAC PD doesn't happen when you cross the street and UC Davis doesn't apply by the same standards or tactics, or the Sheriff's Department doesn't apply the same standards and tactics, then you're doing your community a disservice. And so this has to be a regional discussion. I've had obviously discussions with the mayor, in that regard, and we are having discussions with the county as well too. Our county is a different beast. It is much more conservative, and historically has not benefited our community in a lot of ways. There are some great leaders. Phil Cerna's wonderful. Patrick Kennedy's great, but there are constituents in which they're serving that have a different view for things, and so it's an ongoing challenge. But it's something that if it doesn't happen now, Tina, I don't know what's going to happen, because
it has to happen now.
It has to happen
now. It is in my life. So I'm 71, and
you're a good-looking 71, Tina.
Oh, you.
Man,
I have a new crush on you.
You have some black in you, because
don't tell my wife.
That's some good genes you got going on. Anyway, go ahead.
It's the energy. It's not the skin is sagging. So how is it that we get the state involved? And I think that it's talking to our representatives that we need to change the state of California's laws, because it is regional and it's systemic. And we may have a good police force that's willing to work and change and morph, but like you say, there's no wall.
Yeah.
It is like you can go back and forth, and if you go over to West Sacramento, what's going to happen there? And
Absolutely.
if you go up to El Dorado and Placer, what's going to happen there?
Absolutely.
I think that really mandating the laws now, I mean, it is like the Supremes just ruled yesterday on you can't fire me because I'm gay, so I can't fire myself.
You have job security, Tina.
Yeah, I have job security. But, people thought that was a long time that we had that right. And we don't. And it has to come from the leadership of the state. I think that, and I don't know what they're doing. And I don't know if you have access to what our state is doing. But we need to work local and be involved locally, because that's in our neighborhood.
Right.
But we need to think globally, which is the state of California. I'm not going to think the nation, because we have to wait until November. But California is awesome, right?
Yeah.
We have a great governor.
Mm-hmm.
In spite of all the things that he's working on now, this is something that can happen at his level.
Sure.
How do you get meetings with him?
Actually, I had a meeting with the governor about 2 weeks ago.
You name drop her.
No, I'm not. But it was among a group of people who had a meeting with the governor, and it was he was here in Sacramento, and it was right after the George Floyd incident, or at least it was not right after the George Floyd. It was the week after the protests started. And to your point, I think we have exceptional leadership at the top, and it does start at the top. I mean, the chaos that is the federal government starts at the top. And to your point, though we are California, I think the entire nation looks at California in a weird kind of way because we lead in a different way. And so I think our governor is listening. I mean, he literally, recognized, I think one of the quotes he said was this, this is not the Black community's problem to solve. This is, our community or the greater community to solve. And so I think that he's listening. But it's much bigger than one leader. I mean, it's going to have to be, you're going to have to have a run of leaders and a run of legislation that is going to have to help change things. We have some great state leaders in California. Assemblywoman Shirley Weber has been fantastic. She helped author AB 392, along with Sacramento's Kevin McCarty, but AB 392, which really started to really create a standard for, officer-involved use of deadly force, actually. And so there are some standards that are coming at Sacramento that California is leading the charge in. There's also a discussion that she has a legislation that she's trying to put out right now to repeal Proposition 209. Which obviously is affirmative action, and that the need for that, I think, in California is critical. I think we've gone about 20 years or so without race-based initiatives, and I think that and that hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked.
It has not worked at all, and so we've got to repeal that. So we've got some leaders. California is lucky. But it again, it's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift, and we have to have conversations and outlets like yours where you're talking to people who are outside of our community. We've got to get business leaders to be more thoughtful about the business environments that they're creating for African Americans. We've got to get them more thoughtful about, not just their hiring practices, but procurement and other business opportunities. There are so many disparities that the African American community struggles with, and it's everything from healthcare to business and economics, obviously social justice, education. Right now, technology to me is one of those things that honestly, if we don't get our hands around that and really help, inner communities, inner city communities with technology, that's going to be a real challenge because, think about what COVID did. If you don't have access to technology, where are you getting your groceries? If you're in a inner city community and you're in a food desert, how are you getting access to education? How are you getting access to healthcare? If we don't have these things, if we don't address these things in a thoughtful, responsible manner that really helps the least of us, we're going to be in real trouble, and those gaps are going to get wider and they're already wide, and they have been widening for a while. And I'm hoping, like I said, if we can have this moral awakening from others, I'm trying to be optimistic, as you can tell.
But we have about 3 minutes left. I want to ask you, what can I do? What can my friends do? What can my business cohorts do to group together and to really begin to affect change?
Yeah. First thing, you're doing the first thing, which is listening. I don't think pretending that you have answers is the wrong thing, because no one really has answers. But what we need is resources. And by resources, sometimes that's money, but sometimes it's a matter of leadership or opportunities, creating a pathway. You and I have met. There are times when you'll say, they should be advertising with you. Why aren't they advertising with you? Or this kind of thing. Why? And we need advocates like that to say, hey, there are existing community-based organizations that need, opportunity to a contract. And then if they have opportunity to contract, can they get enough of those resources to help them be sustainable, or is it just enough to get them in trouble? Just
Right.
enough to where they can't hire a CPA to make sure and do their books so they can get it year after year after year, or increase their bandwidth to do
Right.
even greater work. So I think we've got to get leaders like yourselves that are outside of our community that are recognizing this and just saying, how can we help? Let's bring resources into our community. We've been at this for generations, and this has got to stop. And it's most of it is about resources to our community.
Is there a listing somewhere of Black-owned businesses that maybe you can publish on your website,
Sure.
and I can drive people to, so that
Sure.
at least purchase from
Yeah.
Black-owned companies? At least.
Yeah. There are obviously you have resources like the Sacramento Black Chamber of Commerce. They have a directory of Black-owned businesses in the region. There's a movement, an effort to try and create more. But I'll be honest, we've done it time and time again. The challenge with that is many of our businesses, are not able to sustain themselves for very long. So, grand opening is followed too closely by grand closing.
Yeah.
And so that has been a challenge for many of our businesses. But we're working on that. We didn't even talk about what the Observer is about to do over the next few years. We're in the midst of a rebirth and a reimagining, and I think that's going to be really exciting to our community. And so those are the things that we were already working on before COVID, and COVID kind of reinforced our need and desires to do some of these things. So we're excited about providing some of those vehicles for our community.
That's awesome. So I want to thank you, my dear friend. I hold you as a dear friend.
Absolutely.
The thing that's important with friendships is that I can call you up and ask you a stupid white person question.
Yes.
And I have in the past. And you can call me about a stupid question.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think that that's where a relationship that we trust each other and we rely on each other, and I admire you. I admire all the work and all the everything that you do and you bring to our community. So thank you for telling me some of your Black stories to a white person. And we'll keep on keeping on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tina. Love you. And if there's anything you need, I'm here.
All right. Thanks, Larry. I love you too. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.